Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alldus podcast. I'm your host, Ben Sparks, and today we are continuing with our Digital Transformation series, speaking with some of the best and brightest leaders and executives across the ecosystem. Today we are lucky to host Bit Rambusch. Bit currently holds the position of Vice President, Online Support and Knowledge Management. Bit has a 21-year tenure at Dell Technologies and has held a plethora of executive roles throughout the organization, which he will tell us more about as we go on with the podcast. He is an executive with experience leading global customer support service organizations, developing and implementing large-scale service offerings along product and quality management systems and huge programs. Bit has a deep experience in driving digital transformation with defined business results, outcomes, and seamless customer experience across global organizations. In today's conversation, Bit will touch on a range of topics, but we're going to focus in on his career and some of the learns he's had on the projects and programs he's led, some advice for best practice, especially when dealing with and scaling large-scale teams, AI and how this is transforming the landscape of business as we know it, and also some of the successful programs he's had along the way, looking at the future of ITSM, and looking at online support, knowledge management, and his views on the topic. So, Bit, there's quite a lot there, so we better get stuck in. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. It's a great opportunity and look forward to the conversation today.
No, same. So let's start by giving us our listeners an overview of who they're listening to and tell us about your current role and responsibilities.
So I'm Vice President for Online Support and Knowledge Management, and basically responsible for the development, the implementation, and the delivery of digital and social transformation across a wide array of contact and delivery channels through the development of knowledge and content management systems, unified search capabilities, and we're focused on delivering fast, accurate, and seamless digital experiences to our customer base, so internal and external customers. And we're operating on around 500 million interactions a year and support an end user network of our field engineers and call center agents of about 30,000 people. So great opportunity for us to participate in a lot of the transformation that's taking place today.
Fantastic. So let's take your career to date. So 21 years at Dell, that's amazing tenure. I'm sure our listeners would love to know a bit more about that journey. Do you mind telling us about some of the key milestones or promotions or projects you had along the way?
I started out my career as a U.S. Army officer, so I spent some time active duty, and my initial undergraduate degree was in engineering management from U.S. Military Academy at West Point. So a lot of my experiences and influences are really based upon that level of activity. But I've been involved in roles here at Dell around logistics and starting up logistics operations, implementing account management strategies in the services space for some of our largest and global customers. I've had some experience in product introduction and the quality management of those products after they get launched, and again, from a services lens. And then today, I'm now in our online support and knowledge management area. It's been, I think, very interesting from the standpoint of getting to see different parts of the business within Dell have really given me a broad perspective of what our customers have to go through, certainly viewpoints of what our end users have to interact with. So whether it's a call center agent or a logistics person or our field technicians, getting a wide array of those types of experiences, I think, has been extremely crucial in my career.
And some of those areas, why is there any that were extremely instrumental to you as growing to be a leader? Is there any sort of tipping points in your career, I suppose I'm trying to say?
Getting in front of the customer is always an important piece. And my logistics career starting out at Dell, while we weren't in front of customers, we were always involved in supporting customers and getting involved in what I would say mission critical types of services. And so we had the opportunity really to participate in a lot of formal programs where we had to, respond to customers in, minutes and hours versus days from a logistics perspective. And then having the opportunity to get involved in the account management piece where you can see and feel and hear what's going on at site with a customer within their network, what they're trying to do around their core responsibilities of taking care of their customers. Those types of experiences, I think, have really gone a long way in shaping how I've looked at my career in Dell.
Thank you. So from the outside looking in, it's very easy for people to think that senior folks have always been senior. And obviously this isn't the case. There is a journey that you've been on. What do you attribute to your success, and how important were mentors specifically, or people that you've had along this journey with you?
Yeah, good question on the mentor side. And I always tell people are like, should you get a mentor and what did you learn along the way and whatnot? I think it's always good to have somebody that can be a sounding board for you and to test ideas and thoughts around, and somebody that can be a truth teller, if you will, and see some of your blind spots. I also think along the way, as you're getting into a leadership capability, some of the things that you will actually learn from other people. You see what good looks like. You also see what bad looks like. And you can take various attributes along the way and make them your own in your own personal way in terms of how you're leading and developing teams. And I've always had a set of maybe leadership perspectives and principles that I try to follow. And I think it's important that you try to pick some of those things out that are core to your beliefs and core to your leadership styles. And then look around at other people that are successful, and adapting some of those capabilities or some of those attributes, I think, is extremely important as well.
And obviously hindsight's always 2020, but if you were to look back over your career, what advice would you give to your younger self? And I'm thinking specifically about navigating that kind of middle management or directorship level career jumps you've made.
I think the probably first and foremost is delivering results, under promise, over deliver, always be on time, own the outcomes that you have. And one of the things I always think, it's important to be a team player. It's important to lead with a positive, energetic, and can-do attitude. And then I think the other piece is constantly get some feedback and learn how to get feedback and take it seriously. Again, finding somebody, whether it's one person or multiple people, that can really be a truth teller of what your blind spots are. And then take that feedback seriously and work on it, either to minimize it or work on it to correct it, but own the outcome that you have from a career standpoint. Nobody's going to manage your career for you. Don't ever expect your boss to manage your opportunities. It's something that you absolutely have to own if you're going to be successful down the road.
I love it. And making sure you lean into those opportunities. So as an executive leader, and we're talking to a number of executive leaders across a number of different organizations, and everyone has been over the last 18 months embarking on a new challenge. Just generally, if you're looking at inspiring large scale teams in enterprise to achieve great things, specifically, what would be the tips you would offer someone embarking on that kind of journey? Because it's a new skill set, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the skill set is definitely based on COVID and some of the changes that we've seen has caused some changes in what those skill sets actually look like. But, I'd mentioned a couple of things earlier about being positive and energetic and being focused on having a can-do attitude. People want to be surrounded by positive people. Nobody wants to be, part of a negative team, so to speak. I think the other piece of that is from a networking standpoint, what's changed in COVID is it's much harder to network in a remote environment now. So you really have to be intentional in terms of how you get connected, how do you get out of your silo, your organizational silo, so that you can not only drive initiatives cross-functionally and cross different organizations, but also stay connected to people that can help you deliver to your business commitments. And I would say lastly, in terms of your teams and whatnot, you really got to care about your people and focus on their development, focused on their ability to win and putting them in the right situations to grow and improve and certainly to transform. And in today's new remote world, all of those things have to be scheduled, right? It's not like you could go and see somebody in the canteen or at a coffee break or between one meeting or next, you have a brief 2 or 3 minute conversation. You really have to be intentional in terms of how you're connecting with your people, and certainly how you're connecting with others from a networking standpoint.
You definitely can't rely on the water cooler or coffee machine chit chat that used to happen. So look, this is great. There's been so much here that I'm sure people will take away from a mentorship perspective. I know the main part of the podcast was to let's talk sort of digital transformation. So I'd love to know, what are the more macro industry trends driving digital transformation enterprise? And I'm sorry that's a wide question, but I'd love to know your thoughts on it.
No, it is a great question, and I think it's not only is it a broad question, but there's so many things ongoing right now that are contributing to that. I think you're seeing people talk about the concept of 5G. We talk about edge computing or the Internet of Things. And those are things right now that are exploding. So bandwidth is exploding. Your ability to download things is exploding. The Internet of Things, which is going to put more edge compute power, whether it's stoplights, endpoint devices such as temperature controls and fans, et cetera. There's so many endpoint devices now that are gathering data, calculating information, et cetera. And so now you're seeing with this explosion of data, you see this move from public to hybrid. So historically we saw the move from private to public. Now we're seeing a move back to a hybrid state because of all of this compute power that's now moving out to the edge and you don't have time. The latency is going to create a need for us to get closer to the edge where that compute power really can happen and where decisions and data need to take place. I think the other piece when you talk about the explosion of data as well is security of it. And so you've seen a bunch of high profile security issues with customer data or company data that has been exposed through ransomware and things like that. So security has never been more important than it is today and will continue to be more important as that data starts to explode and become much more proliferating into the ecosystem. The last thing I would just tell you is just with COVID, I think we are now seeing a lot of this digital transformation start to compress. So the speed of which people are willing to adopt and transform, it's no longer optional. It's mandatory. You have to do it because we've had to transform so much faster as a result of the implications associated with COVID.
And what does a digital transformation mean to you specifically?
Well, think of it kind of just very simple terms. It's really about removing manual processes and replacing them with automation or some sort of a digital capability. And people probably heard this, but people, process, and technology are the triangle, if you will, of things that you need to have working in conjunction with each other. And then I would say it's those three things surrounded by how you apply your data. The data is the new oil or the fuel that really makes those things go. And that's where we're headed, removing all of these manual types of activities, getting them into automation. So as the data and the number of points, endpoint devices and things like that explode, you're going to have to be able to make decisions faster. And humans aren't going to be able to do that in the future based on the amount of data that is being collected and analyzed. So the more we can start the automation process, the better we can actually augment some of the customer experience activities.
And that's a really nice segue, actually. So looking at customer experience specifically, how are companies benefiting from change, again, specifically to customer experience?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go back to that last point. When you think about the number of endpoint devices and that need compute power at the edge and 5G and security, et cetera, the ability of a human to physically process those things just isn't going to be possible. And it's not possible today. So the more you can, start thinking about your transformation, how you can adopt, how you can adapt, how you can learn and experiment in these new environments is going to be critical to business success. And if you don't, from a company standpoint, you lose the ability really to remain and stay competitive at the end of the day. There are going to be companies that automate and digitize, whether it's processes or decision making or activities in the customer services area, that they're going to take their cost per transaction or cost per interaction down to such a low number that if you're not investing in this capability now, you're going to be behind competitively. And they're going to take the money that they're saving in those cost transactions and use that for more innovation and more investment and continue to use that as a cycle of improving their processes.
Is that the two main areas that a C-suite would look at when looking at the success of transformation? Is there anything else that an executive level stakeholder would look for to look into the success of an implementation?
Yeah, I always tell people when you're thinking about getting engaged in a conversation in the C-suite, there's really three areas of focus that are probably most important day in and day out: cost, revenue, and net promoter score. So those three things. You can talk to anybody, whether they're an accountant, the CEO, an engineer, a software designer, a call center technician, everybody understands those three outcomes. And it's easy to get people behind them. And so if you can take your business cases and think about them not just in the view of maybe your organizational silo or your area of expertise, but think about how they're going to add to those three areas, how you're going to reduce costs, drive revenue, how you're going to increase the NPS scores. Ultimately, those are the three things that the C-suite's going to care about, and they're going to be how they make 99% of their decisions going forward.
You've obviously looked at digital transformation at a very macro level. When we look at platforms or products, including like ServiceNow, for instance, in the ITSM space, how have they changed the landscape? And I'm thinking current day, but also maybe you could touch on some of your predictions for the future as well.
Yeah, so you think about some of where I think some of the software is going through. It's getting more modularized. We're seeing a lot of APIs, micro front ends, things like that, where we're starting to standardize some of these capabilities look like. And so when we look at whether it's ServiceNow or Salesforce, et cetera, there's so many other companies now that are becoming part of those ecosystems with quote unquote plugins or API integrations. It really is going to standardize how these processes ultimately get better and developed. And so what this is going to enable us, I think, in the customer service arena, is if you look at whether you have multiple sites or you have multiple places around the world, in a lot of cases, it's very hard for us to do process control. And so now you're going to see with these ecosystems, process control is going to become much easier. And why is that? In process control, the better you can control your processes, the cheaper you're going to have the cheaper cost is going to be one of the outcomes. It's going to drive a better customer experience. It's going to drive a better employee experience. If you can do those two things, lower your costs and drive a better experience, it will free up dollars, number one, for you to help drive innovation. And then secondly, it will also free up dollars for you to remain competitive and invest against your competitive space. So standardizing all of these processes in this infrastructure is really going to help us lean out what's happening in the services industry, and it's really going to drive great experiences for our customers and those internal stakeholders.
So your role at the moment is focused on online support and knowledge management. I'd love for you to talk to our audience about online support and knowledge management and the importance it has in enterprise and maybe even Dell, and I don't know if there's any case studies that you could or wouldn't mind sharing with us.
One of the great case studies that we have going on right now is a microcosm of some of the broader challenges that we have and have had, and I think other companies have. Dell, over the series of many years, has, in a lot of cases, grown up in organizational types of silos, and processes in one silo don't always mesh with the process in another silo. And I think now when we get into this concept around digital transformation and digitization of processes and capabilities, those walls between those organizations are starting to come down. And so it's a much higher level of requirement for collaboration across functional spaces. And so one of the examples that we would have is what we're doing with our virtual agent technology right now. And we actually had probably 3 or 4 different virtual agent technologies and processes that we were in the process of looking at probably 3 to 4 years ago. We had one in sales, we had one in our manufacturing or our online order experience, we had one in our support teams, and we had one in our social media teams. And we understand that our customers are engaging in all of these channels, and we don't want those experiences to be different. We want them to be seamless. In order for those experiences to be seamless, we actually had to go through and start to consolidate some of the systems. We had certainly had to consolidate the business strategy, which would allow us to scale across multiple functional areas. And then also it drives a better cost structure for us. And as we have deployed our virtual capability, we've done so with one technology, one content management background, and one team focused on automating the different channels that we see with our customers. And it's providing us great insight from a customer perspective, and certainly better outcomes for customer experience and how we can continue to develop in that vein.
You must be very proud. That's not a small feat. I think that's one for your resume for sure.
Absolutely.
So we hear a lot about how the lines between digital transformation and AI are blurring. We see products like ServiceNow become more complex. I'd love to know your thoughts on the AI side of automation. So let's start with what does AI enable now that just wasn't possible before?
Well, let me say something about AI. And I think there's a couple of terms in the industry that are people get enamored with. And artificial intelligence is one. I would say another one is machine learning. And then there's obviously a lot of talk around things like data sciences and data engineering and big data. And I've actually been in meetings where we've had leaders say, hey, we just need to go turn the AI engine on. And I'll go back to something I said earlier around people, process, technology, wrapped around data. Those three things have to exist in a very coordinated orchestra, if you will, in order to make AI real. And where AI, again, is going to automate some of these tasks that, number one, we don't have the capability and the volume to execute to because of the explosion of data. And they're also going to automate some menial types of activities, which people aren't going to want to do for long periods of time. And I think it's going to have the opportunity to enrich our lives, enrich our employees, and certainly it will provide an augmented experience for our customers and a better experience for them in their outcomes.
And is there anything specifically within the customer service arena that just was not possible before that is now possible by adopting more AI-based technologies into the processes?
We talked just a little bit earlier about what we're doing on the virtual agent side. So we've automated a lot of those tasks. So it's been, probably a year and a half to 2 years for us where those things have actually been in place. It has made our agents much more efficient. We've been able to pass information to the agent if they actually have to talk to somebody. And all of that information is now pre-populated so customers don't have to repeat themselves. So there's really no value in terms of having, people get on the phone and you enter in all your information, then somebody picks up the phone and they ask you the same questions over again. That's probably one of the most irritating things you can have from a customer experience point of view. We're eliminating those types of activities. And I think those are great examples. Another one that we're actively working on is capabilities that we would call next best action. So it's a series of if this, then that types of steps. And think of it mainly like a decision tree. And so we're automating those things to help, whether it's customers do self-service or troubleshooting, or it's helping our agents provide a better experience in a consistent manner in terms of how they're servicing their customers. But it's a decision tree that helps us to automate what is the next step that I should take in terms of solving a problem.
And AI being brought into a business, obviously it's great. We see so much out there, be it on LinkedIn or in the press. I think it's fair to say, though, it's not a magic pill that can just be, or a solution that can be dropped into a business and start looking after itself. While that would be fantastic, what needs to happen beforehand for effective AI to be in a business? And thinking like, what foundations does it need, or do you need to make sure that are there from a leadership perspective?
No, and this is one of the things that really excites me the most. And if you think about, I'm sure everybody's heard the expression garbage in, garbage out. AI and digital transformation has the ability to make really bad decisions faster if your data is not right.
Okay.
So that's the last thing you want to do. So I think there's a very high level of and sense of, well, I've got to get the data constructs right. I have to build relationships between my data, relationships between different organizational types of data in order to make these experiences seamless. Well, there has to be some level of human supervision and human sustaining activity on that. So AI is not in and of itself going to, I don't think personally, eliminate a bunch of jobs. I think it's going to augment our ability to provide better customer services for our end users. And they're going to provide much more rich experiences for customers, richer experiences for our employees. If you're going after these technologies without really understanding the human oversight, the human supervision, the human operational aspect of making sure that they're constantly, tuned and up to date and contextually aware, the technology is not pixie dust. It's not a magic pill. So it has to be constantly nurtured and taken care of.
Are there any nuances that are missing within how AI fits into a service organization specifically?
Yeah, I think the nuance is honestly, you have to think about this end-to-end customer experience. And again, I'd say it's getting out of those silos. And I see this at Dell, and it really makes me excited from the standpoint of what we're working on and how we're working on it, because it's forcing us to have, these conversations between organizations that probably really weren't as detailed as maybe they need to be. You think about from a customer perspective, a customer can go online, they're going to start on Google, they're going to pick up the phone, we may dispatch a part, so there's an interaction with our logistics team, there's an interaction now with the field, there's obviously the interaction with the phone agent. How are you connecting and looking at those experiences with your customers in an end-to-end world? How is that data then connected? And I think all too often we typically look at, and I know we've been guilty of this before in the past, we're like, what's the technical support experience? And we don't really then say, well, here's the experience in tech support. Well, what was the customer experience across the entire engagement, inclusive of tech support, inclusive of the logistics experience, inclusive of the field engineer, inclusive of the return process, or inclusive of the web process, et cetera. So I think there's so many more things that we're starting to now work on that are really driving and tearing down these organizational barriers, and much more focused on an end-to-end experience at the end of the day, which is awesome.
But this has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you. I have no doubt you've given our listeners a lot to think about. As we draw to a close, is there anything you'd like to share? Maybe anything we've missed about yourself or Dell, or who knows, any resources on YouTube or anything that people can utilize out there when thinking of navigating a route to leadership even?
There is so much to learn. There are so many opportunities. There's some research out there that would say probably 70% of the jobs that will exist in 5 years from now haven't even been thought of yet. And I think that's just an exciting time to be a part of this. And this transformation is bigger than the transformation we saw in the early 2000s or late 90s. It's, faster, more change, and it's just an exciting time to be a part of. And so I always tell my teams, I'm like, think about, what are you reading? What are you learning? Where are you exploring? This is a rapidly changing world. There's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity, and you got to be ready to take advantage of it. It's going to be a very interesting next couple of years, and we're going to see some just unbelievable changes in the environment. And I'm looking forward to being a part of it, and hopefully other people will as well.
Indeed, you're definitely front and center. We definitely have a front seat. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Bit, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm sure you might get a few people reach out to you on LinkedIn asking you for some tips and tricks along the way.
Absolutely. It's been great, Ben. I appreciate the time today.